and I rise to talk about the tax debate the Senate is currently having. I want to highlight some of the reasons why I think this bill is bad and, frankly, focus on the missed opportunity that we are about to embark on when we could have found a much better project. Let me tell you a story from when I was mayor. I was mayor of Richmond, and I know my colleague from Oklahoma was a mayor as well. And when I was mayor, I had a city council colleague who introduced a seemingly benign bill. It was a bill to limit the number of dogs and cats that anybody could have at their residence. Now, pursuant to the city rules, we had to post this resolution in the newspaper for a couple of weeks so that citizens could read it. And we had a public hearing where any citizen who wanted to speak for or against the resolution had the opportunity to. And then the city council members debated, and then we had a vote. And it turned out to be a little more controversial than the council member originally contemplated. The minor little debate in the City Council of Richmond when I was mayor about the number of pets you could have at your residence received more openness and transparency and discussion and debate than the vote that we will have within a few hours or days about the entire tax code of the United States. Instead of doing a bill openly and deliberately with a lot of public input and ultimately reaching for a bipartisan result, we have moved hastily in secret in a bipartisan way, and in my view, that is the reason why the end product is going to be so discouraging. We had a vote in the Budget Committee to forward this tax bill forward, and it was interesting. We actually voted before we discussed it. The bill was on everybody's desk. The chair decided that we would vote, and only later would we talk about it. That would never have been done at a Richmond City Council meeting. We had a full audience of citizens who wanted to be heard. They were not given an opportunity to. That wouldn't be done at a Richmond City Council meeting. And some of the citizens started to sort of protest and get angry and get mad and shout. And when that happens in a committee meeting, I cringe because it's a violation of the decorum I expect. But what choice do they have? This is only a tax reform that affects the entire American economy and every American family and every American business, and they feel shut out of the process. The first version of this bill that was live was released to the public in the House on Thursday, November 9th. The current version, which is the fifth version of the bill, was only released last Friday night, 4 days ago. So this bill to completely rework the United States economy moves from introduction to passage over just 41 days, multiple versions, often with handwriting in them, handed out the last minute before votes. The last time this body did comprehensive tax reform in 1986, the Senate had 36 days of public hearings over 10 months. This plan has had zero public hearings. When the Finance Committee refuses to allow a hearing, when the Budget Committee forces a vote before the members even have a chance to express their opinions, is this really what the Senate wants to be known for? And the stakes couldn't be higher. I'm hoping still at the end, I think it's highly unlikely, but I hope still at the end we might decide to do this the right way, not the wrong way. Because when you approach the process the wrong way, quickly, secretively, in a partisan way, without public input or hearings, you get a bad bill. And this bill, in my view, is a bad bill. The benefits in this bill overwhelmingly accrue to folks who are at the top end, who frankly don't need our help. 83% of the tax plan's benefits go to the top 1% earners in this country because of giveaways like increasing the estate tax threshold and altering the alternative minimum tax. If you make over $1 million, you will get a collective tax cut of $36.9 billion just in 2019. Those who make over $1 million will see their taxes go down by that much. Massive tax cuts go to foreign individuals who own stock in American companies. About $48 billion just in the first year go to foreign individuals because of their ownership of stock in American companies. But to the contrary, millions of middle-class people are hurt. By 2027, every income group below $75,000 will face a tax increase on average. In 92 million households, the combined population of probably 30 states, under $200,000 would face net tax increases in this bill. That's over half of all households in the country. And the working poor get hurt especially. The working poor who have the most to lose and the least margin to get hurt. By 2025, this bill would reduce the after-tax incomes of households with incomes below $40,000, while it would boost the after-tax incomes of households with incomes over $1 million. I want to assume in charity that the hurting of the working poor and the helping of folks at the top is a result of haste rather than design. We could take the time and get this right. These analyses that I've just indicated are done by the nonpartisan CBO, whose director is from the Mercatus Institute at George Mason University, which is widely known as a very conservative economics department, and also by the Joint Committee on Taxation. And all the analyses come to virtually the same conclusion. The bill dramatically increases the deficit to the tune of $1.4 trillion over the next 10 years. It will lead to millions of people falling into the ranks of uninsured. The CBO says 13 million. And for my own Commonwealth, it has a number of provisions that are particularly harmful. We are one of the top 5 recipients or claimants to the deductibility of state and local income taxation. Virginians are going to be hurt. Virginians are going to be hurt because of the elimination of the historic tax credit. Why couldn't we work together? Why couldn't we work together to try to do something that would be right, as President Reagan and Congress did in 1986? 16 Democrats and 1 Republican stood up a few weeks ago and we said we are ready to work with Republicans on tax reform. You had former governors who've done bipartisan tax reform. You had former tax commissioners who've worked on tax issues. And we said we are ready to work with you to make this better. Every one of us in that group have worked on bipartisan tax reform. I've done it as a mayor and I've done it as a governor. And I know how to do it and I have ideas, but nobody was interested in a single one. The night we voted here, the late Friday night, I put an amendment on the table to show my Republican colleagues our good faith in saying we'll work with you. I stood up and, of course, I was only given a minute to make an amendment. The process says, even though it's the entire American economy, you only get 1 minute. And I stood and I said, I can't fix the bill in a minute, but I can do a couple of things. I can reduce the deficit by $1 trillion, and I can make every middle-class tax cut that's temporary in this bill permanent. I can do those 2 things. Permanent middle-class tax cut, reduce the deficit by $1 trillion, if you will agree with me to do the following. Don't touch the AMT and the estate tax, and reduce the corporate tax rate, not to 20%, but to 25%, from 35 to 25. 34 Democrats voted for tax reform for the reduction of the corporate tax rate from 35 to 25 and making middle-class tax cuts permanent and reducing the deficit by $1 trillion, but not a single Republican, not a single one, would vote to make the middle-class tax cuts permanent and reduce the deficit. We still want to work on it. We can still make it better. As I conclude, Mr. President, I'll just notice, again, it was notable that when President Reagan did tax reform as president in 1986, this didn't get 50 votes plus a tiebreaker, 51 votes. In this body, the greatest deliberative body in the world, the Reagan-era tax reform got 97 votes because they took the time to have the hearings and hear from the public, and they took the time to incorporate great ideas, no matter the party of those who offered them. President Reagan said as he was embarking upon that, quote, "It should not be a partisan debate, for the authors of tax reform come from both parties, and all of us want greater fairness, incentives, and simplicity in taxation." He was right then, and that remains true, and yet this is a process that's not incorporated either the thoughts of the public or the thoughts of the Democratic minority. I'll say this, Mr. President, to close. The GOP is not measured by who it says its hero is. Most of my GOP friends have posters of President Reagan or pictures of President Reagan and talk about him as a personal hero. But you're really not measured by who you say your hero is. You're measured by who you act like. This is not a President Reagan-era tax reform. This is not the way President Reagan would have done tax reform. This is a President Trump bill. A last-minute change in this bill, a very important last-minute change that only came in at the very end, would directly benefit President Trump and his family, by further exploiting a loophole to give real estate developers more money. This was on top of giving him relief on the estate tax and the alternative minimum tax. But at the last minute, there was one last change made that was specifically designed to help President Trump make even more. No, this is not a Reagan-era tax reform bill. This is purely a product of President Trump, and it follows what he does. Say one thing and do another. Claim to help the middle class, but actually hurt them. Say it's not going to help me or wealthy people when it actually does. I'm not surprised by the president, but I am surprised at many of my colleagues here, because we could have worked on something and not missed an opportunity that would have been far better for the American economy. And it is still my hope that we will. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.